I'd like to call this meeting the commission for the first planning commission of the year to order. The first order of business is a pledge to the allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next order is the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections at this time?
Well, Lindy was here. One major one, I was here. On page, you can see all the motions
Oh, that's true.
on the first page, it says Wendy was absent.
Oh.
Other than that, everything's fine.
Okay, other than that obvious omission, I think it captured the essence of the meeting. So I would move to, with that correction, to adopt the minutes.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes with the addition to the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. The next order of business is for citizens' comments. This is for anyone to comment on anything concerning the town of Mount Airy that we are not going to be discussing this evening. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to aware fellow volunteers that the survey is out, and most of you might have received it already, but as volunteers, please spread the word and encourage people to fill it out. It only helps us all.
Any other comments?
Doc, what's the I forget the timing on, I think it's the 29th, it's the end of the month? Okay, and then what do you estimate for processing time and preliminary results and all of that?
We haven't gotten into that yet. We're going to have a meeting.
Okay.
It's been a push to get it out. We set up a schedule getting it out. We wanted it out February 1st, and we got it out.
I think one of the things that would be very insightful is when you do compute the results, is a comparison of that with the 2008 survey and even the 2012 community needs assessment.
So we repeated to that question. We repeated, I think, about 25% of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. Yes, that will be part of the answer.
Yeah. Super.
Next, we'll hear from our planners. Carroll County planner first, Mary.
Hi, I'm back for a few more months. The gentleman. The gentleman that was with you in November is no longer with the department.
Oh.
Anna Weber is going to be the new liaison to the town of Mount Airy, but I'll be coming for the next few months. And Hannah started in November. She comes to us from Shippensburg University, and we are very pleased to have her.
Good.
So we'll be coming together for a few months.
Okay, welcome.
And I just have a quick update on the comprehensive rezoning. I don't know if you got an update in November, but the Board of Commissioners held their public hearing in October on the commercial, industrial, and employment campus zones. They held 3 or 4 work sessions after that, and then they adopted the new text on December 12th. The new zones became effective on the 22nd of December, so all new commercial, industrial, and employment campus development in Carroll County outside the municipalities is under the new regulations right now. We also now are accepting applications for rezoning to those zones, and we've sent letters out to property owners who have a land use designation in the Carroll County Master Plan or the Freedom Comprehensive Plan that could take advantage of one of these zones. And the deadline for applying for that is February 7th. We anticipate several months of review once we get those applications in. And then we are hoping it'll go through our Planning Commission, and then the Board of County Commissioners will act on it hopefully this summer. So that's what we have in mind, and we'll be bringing updates to you about any properties that are in the vicinity of Mount Airy.
when did you say the zones became official?
December
December?
22nd.
Okay, thank you.
And are they available online or?
Yes, it is. Actually, if you go onto our county website, it's not just the bills themselves, but it's the new code. So you would just pull up the quick link to the Carroll County zoning code, chapter 150.
Okay, are you able to speak to any changes relative to, to acreage that's adjacent to Mount Airy
Specifically, well,
with regard to these changes?
we adopted an employment campus zone, so there's the employment campus properties that are up on 27. I could come back and give you a more detailed briefing on that. That's a pretty big part of the new legislation, and if you want me to, I could brief you on it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be
I'd like to have that next. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. And the last thing we're doing right now, well, not the last thing, but the next thing we're doing right now is looking at the residential zoning districts. And we have a focus group working with us, an open focus group. Anybody can attend. Those are on the fourth Friday of every month. And we're hoping to wrap that up and get it to our planning commission in the summer as well, to move on to the county commissioners.
Clarify, Mary, is that's really for only in the Carroll County zone, in the Carroll County portion, not within the municipality?
Oh,
The OPE,
absolutely.
Because we already
Right.
have an OPE, and I don't think
Right.
it's going to impact that unless we do
No.
a text amendment or something, but,
No, it wouldn't impact.
okay.
Okay? But I'll come back. Do you want, next time, do you want a 10-minute briefing on the employment campus?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our Frederick County planner is not here. We'll go ahead. There was a request possibly to move the concept site plan for King Sports Construction up to before the ordinance discussions. However, we're waiting for someone else to get here. So as soon as she gets here, or you can just talk about it when we're, okay. So for our first introduction and discussion is ordinance 2020, the proposed amendment, part 2 of the town code, 98-23, 112-37.2, creating a new section, 98-61, entitled Mixed Use Development, MXD, in addition to creating a new section, 112-37.2, amending the Article 8, 112-62 special exemption. We'll have discussion recommendations to the town council. Does anyone, John, do you want to go ahead and kind of start and introduce this so that we know where we are?
This is a
Do you have your microphone on?
I do, but I'll have to try to talk into it. Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So this was the MXD was a zone that I think was initially brought up by the Planning Commission prior to the implementation of the vision plan that was sort of directed by the Planning Commission members. Once on that completion, the next step was to move forward with an MXD zoning ordinance, taking what you guys had started with and bringing it back to you for some additional comments, and then giving recommendations back to the town council. The draft that we received from your previous work sessions were modified very minimally to accommodate some requests from some of the developers of adjacent properties, i.e. the Beck property. And Victor Kaz is here this evening if you need to talk with him. And this is just basically a new ordinance that we're trying to get your input to get it back to town council before the April 6th, 2020 meeting.
Any questions from the commission members?
Well, I mean, are we going to go through it, or should we just start where? Questions.
We can go through it. We can start and go through it.
Well, another part of the background on this was we realized that we were running up against our deadline in terms of the last master plan update, and we hadn't finalized, this piece. We felt like that it was time for 2 additional zoning districts. MXD was something that we thought could be of use to the town, and also OPE. But rather than further delay the finalization of the update at the end of 2013, we sketched it out and said that that would be our first responsibility going forward. And so with a lot more input and a lot more time and workshops, we drafted this piece, and I think that's where it stands, and I don't see substantial change to what we came up with as our draft at that point, and the points that we discussed and the concerns we had. Because we had a lot of due diligence that we felt we needed to be responsible for, that was really part and parcel of our rationale to request a downtown vision plan, to bring in some professional expertise, to look at our objectives in a very carefully crafted RFP, and to give us back, some professional input. And we went through that whole process, so we have that as well. So I think it continues to hang together, and as I've looked through it 2 or 3 times in the last week, I still feel that way.
Okay, so if we start and we go with a chapter 98 to start out with on page 2 of this ordinance. So these B and I are the 2 that are changing. Required open space and residential and recreational areas to be dedicated. We have a number B and a number I, so I'm assuming that those are the only 2 that are changing.
Correct.
Okay,
All right, so I have a question.
go ahead.
So on, I guess it's page 3, it's basically the open space required for various densities. So I'm curious where the 10% across the board came from for mixed D. I can tell you my specific question, I guess, because I was trying to look back at what it was before, and even though I can't quite read that, there's a difference between, so in one of the other paragraphs, I don't remember where it is, but you all know it, is that it can be like not more than 75% residential, not less than 25% non, and then or vice versa. So I'm curious why the mixed open space is 10% regardless of the amount of residential is in the development.
That's a great question. The 10% was sort of at a staff level, and also a recommendation from our consultant for the vision plan. They said it's average in a mixed-use development, 5 to 8% is what they were saying is the correct number currently out in the industry. And we stuck it at 10% because we felt that was above the normal, sort of trying to capture that the development of both, the residential and commercial elements. So that's really up to your discretion to say if that's what you think is acceptable. But that's what we utilized. That's what we're recommending. And you can see that that's underlined, so that is in addition to the previous language.
It's not underlined. Oh, the MXD is underlined.
MXD and the 10%
Oh, right.
indicates a replacement or an addition.
Leslie, I think what you're referring to is on page 11, and am I wrong in this? It's the ratio for every, if you have 75% commercial, you have to have 25% residential, but of that, then you have to have 10% open space. Is that basically how it translates?
10% of the 75% if
So the
it's
open
residential.
space requirement, so the 75-25, like if you have 75% commercial and 25% residential, or flipped, of whatever the percentage is, that land use has to be 10% open space. Is that
For the residential.
For the residential.
Is that right? I mean, if that's right, then that's fine.
right? That, I think that's what it was.
I don't think that's what we're anticipating. I'm not really sure exactly I think it's just 10% of the total parcel
Yeah.
would be,
Of the total net developable acreage. Again, it was added to 9823 because MXD was not part of 9823 previously. So we wanted to introduce it there so that it's always, part of that section. And the 10% can be modified, but that 10% was thrown in there. It's of the net developable acreage of the whole parcel.
So that would come off the top.
Come off the top, correct. And again, like John mentioned, it was something like 5 to 8% in the vision plan. If you want to tweak that number, that's your discretion.
I mean, just in terms of looking at other residential, say like R2, RE, you have a 35% open space. So like if you have a mixed D and you have 75% of that is residential, then it would seem like that's going to be a lot less open space than in a regular development that wasn't mixed D, even just looking at the residential portion. And not just a little bit, but kind of fairly significantly less. So that's just my observation.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Pat Rockenberg, Mayor, Town of Mount Airy. Originally, I don't think we had any open space requirement for commercial at all in our code, so it was 0. Prior to, I guess, 2017, I know it started back in the early 2000s, we had a 10% requirement for residential that was very low, and that's why we took it up to 35, even 45%. So I guess you need to look at what you're trying to encourage in an MXD zone. I think you're trying to encourage development, so to apply it to commercial, I am sensitive to losing our open space because it's one of my big drives when I sat in your seat was to increase that open space. But we also want to look at increasing the MXD application. So I would urge you to probably think about it on a residential level only and not to the entire
Right.
parcel.
That's what I'm trying to do on a residential. And if it's on a residential level, then I would think 10% of the residential. And then zero open space requirement for whatever the percentage is of commercial and 10% for whatever is the residential portion. To me, that makes,
well, and open space requirements for commercial is 0 currently, right? So
Exactly.
it's sort of like, almost like a balancing act. The 10% is allowing for the development, but it also is covering the 10% of the commercial area is being developed.
okay.
So we're still getting actually, 18, 20, I mean, it's hard to say what the actual number is going to be related to.
Yeah, but if we, right,
That's what I'm saying.
Not really, I mean.
It's by the percentage of net developable acreage. Right.
yeah, so it can't really be across the board. It has to be
So-
whatever this residential component of that.
I mean, that's what I think.
So it's kind of a floating thing.
Barney has
Barney
something to
has
say though.
something to say.
I just add one thing to that, where that
Sure.
number, just kind of help relate it. One thing we added in here also was a density requirement, a maximum density requirement, which was 7 units per acre. So it's similar to a townhouse. So when you mix single-family townhouses, apartments, if they, overall, if you look at the whole picture and overall they have a density of 7, you have the equivalent of a townhouse community. So townhouse community requires 50% open space. And if you only look at 25%, because it's a 75-25, 50% of the 25 is 12.5%. So 10%, it's kind of, comes off of that. But, again, you can tweak it how you want, because they might put in all apartments, they might just put in single families. You never know what they're going to put in there, but you want to look at that density ratio too, which didn't used to be in there. We added that as well.
And you may also recall that when we did this quite a few years ago, there was, some concern about it having even 75% residential as part of this, and that was sort of a compromise for some of us. Of course, we haven't voted on it, so I guess, we're voting, we haven't done a recommendation. But, again, for some history, it's like 70, it depends on how many of these mixed-use projects end up being 75% residential as opposed to 50%, 50/50, or as opposed to 75% commercial. So. Right, but you want to make sure you have the open space with it. For the resident, would you say it's high, or, you think it's high? Come back to the table, sir.
I think 75%, I haven't followed this mixed-use zone, but if you're going to get any, I was trying to encourage commercial development, mainly up Center Street and some of those areas.
I mean, I always thought
Yeah, if you're
75%
going
was
as
high
as
when I was,
75%, I'd take a harder look at the open
Okay.
space.
I-
We're not trying to encourage that.
yeah, thank you.
Exactly, but we also want, there is a Fannie Mae requirement in lending. We also want to be able, if we do have residential in that mixed use, for the residential component to get financing, you have to be at minimum 75% residential in order for the residents to get financing on their houses. That's a Fannie Mae requirement. I got it here. It's commercial space and mixed use
but I
allocation from
mean,
Fannie Mae.
I don't think that when people are buying their houses, they're not looking to see if Fannie Mae buys the loans afterwards, so you're saying they're not going to.
Yeah, but mostly every single lender out there does a Fannie Mae.
Yeah, but
They've
we also
got-
know that, I really don't think that we should be basing our decisions here, because there are a lot of changes, potential changes, that are going to be happening at that level. And
Okay,
I just don't think that that's, I hear what you're saying, but.
It's been around for a while, and Virginia's having a problem with it right now, so I just,
Well,
that's fine.
But in that instance, like so when we were doing this before and we said, okay, we'll go up to, but it's almost like you're saying, well, they all have to be 75% residential, which is certainly not what's even in it now.
No, they can't be 35, any more than 35, the commercial, whatever you start with whatever, let's say it's 75, 25, I don't know how to say this. If it's not 75, 25, 35% of what it is can't be over commercial. Let's just leave it and we'll worry about it later. Not going to get into it. I agree. We compromised at 75%. Are we all in agreement with the 10%? Do we want to say 10% commercial, of the commercial component? What do you think?
No, I want to say 10%. Okay, so let's do an actual example. Okay, so if you do have 75% residential, then how much, that's acreage, so that's, I don't know.
Gross developable acreage. So it depends on if there's steep slopes or if there's, it's something I don't know if we can quantify right now on specific. You have to have a specific property to determine that.
So I guess my question is then why, since we don't know how much residential is going to be in each of these, why can't we just say 10% of the residential open space and 0% open space for the commercial portion? So because that way you're getting 10% for the whatever the residential is, and 0% for commercial, because we don't require open space for commercial.
You don't count steep slopes and unusable land.
Right, anyway.
Right.
So that would be my,
Right.
Okay.
And that could be part of it, trails, sidewalks.
yeah, I mean.
And that's for you guys to decide what you want or what you're willing to.
That's what I would agree.
Do you want to,
Get the motion.
motion? Hold on.
Well, I mean.
We have some
I don't
comment.
know if we're changing, I mean, I would think we'd do, like, at the end, know if anything else is changing.
Okay.
But if you want me, I can do it now.
Well, let's put it, we know what we want to say. Keep in mind when we get to the end that we make sure that we are. We have yes, sir? Yes, you have to come forward, please.
Victor Kazanjian, Kaz Brothers, for the proposed developer for the Beck property. With respect to the 10%, it's not relevant the way you're discussing it doesn't bother me one way or another on the Beck property, but if there are other pieces that are MXD, MXD is mixed use. So if there's for example, a property owner in the town who wants to do 4 work-live apartments, for example, over a business, how do you apply the open space to that person? Is he a commercial or is he residential? You should have some type of single percentage for MXD or a waiver.
There might be a different standard for the downtown zone, for those infill places.
Even if there are other MXD that's not in it. I'm just
talking about-
saying,
yeah.
there can be properties that aren't the Beck property
Right.
that have a mixed, the whole point of this is mixed use, and it can, where we may be doing use next to use, there may be uses that are combined uses that particular provision won't apply to.
When you say there may be uses that are combined, what do you,
In a single building,
okay, right.
on a single property, that may not be able to have a definable residential area that has 10%, a definable commercial area that has 0%. So I just would say, just to keep that in mind, that it may not be a broad brush available to do it that way. On the Beck property, you can do it that way, but there are other pieces that probably, or may not meet that standard on an MXD.
And that's something to think about. I don't think it should change this. We could put something else. But last in November, we were talking about, completely eliminating stuff, bizarrely enough, from the downtown zone. So I assume regardless of what happens with the downtown zone, there's certainly going to be a different percentage than what this is. Now, if there's, I assume there might be some other properties not in the downtown zone. I can't think of any that are going to be like little tiny, mixed
Well,
use.
that have to be zoned MXD.
I know, no, I'm saying that would fit Mr. Victor, right, Victor? Yeah. So I don't know how you want to address that. And also that whether I don't know, council hasn't voted, have they, on that?
No. The MXD for the downtown, the open space for downtown?
Yeah.
No. No.
There'll be a public meeting
Yep.
this coming Monday.
Yeah, so I guess that, you would think that would sort of be, I don't know, brought into this, but.
Well, it's 2 separate zones, so I think we just have to look at this zone specifically and how we're
Right. Yeah,
tailoring this
downtown
zone.
Yeah.
So we can pass something on to the town council for their.
When you were discussing this, staff, did you have any discussions about that, when you had residential over top of commercial?
We did, but I think the developer of this parcel said that he wasn't going to have that kind of an element where he'd have commercial on the first floor and residential on the second and third floor. And
Well, it's not to say it's not, right, but I think it's not to say that it won't happen. I think we need to address it now so that we don't have to come back and do stuff all over. Because that's what we're kind of, we're,
working towards.
yeah.
It can be
Actually, about what Victor just said is that if we left it as just 10%, then anybody who did any mix, if it were one building, with cafe on the bottom, apartment on the top, that would be 10% open space. Now, so if it's a larger situation like the Beck property, I think it would be better to divide it, but it doesn't mean we can't also have something in here where it's like, well, if it's a smaller, some type of property like he was describing, that we can't just say, well, it's still, it's 10%.
So under the way this is written now, the 10% would apply to both scenarios, right?
Right, for the whole.
Yes.
For the developable parcel.
It could be a percent of what, what percent is it commercial, what percent is residential, and then 10% of that percent.
Okay.
It's math.
Okay. I guess that's one thing we'll have to address when it comes up, because we don't know how much is gonna be residential, how much is going to be commercial.
Yeah, but see, I mean, this doesn't, if we have this in the code, it doesn't give us discretion. It's
No.
just going to be whatever it is.
Right.
So,
Unless we put in there, and I don't want to do this, put in a special exception for those types of buildings. But I don't particularly want to do that.
I mean, I think the real issue comes back to what we were talking about before, is that it's only an issue if you're going to have a really high percentage of residential, like 75%.
Okay.
You know, and then some of us are proposing that you would want to make sure you have at least 10% open space for that 75% residential. I don't really know how that impacts. I mean, it could actually positively impact a situation like Victor was talking about, because it could say, well, only 50% of this parcel is residential, so you don't have to have, you only have to have 10% of that 50%, right?
Right.
So I don't really see that makes it worse for developers to do that.
Right. Okay.
Percent of a percent.
Am I wrong, Barney? You're the engineer.
Not, I mean, the way you could look at it is, I would probably lean towards that they're going to maximize the residential. So you're going to be at 75% residential. And if you only want to apply it to residential, instead of 10%, maybe do 7.5% of the whole acreage.
Of the whole acre.
But if it's codified as 10%, we can't do that.
Residential, 1/4 is commercial, then do 3/4 of that number if you don't want 10%.
No, we do want 10%.
We want the 10%.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were trying to only apply it to residential and keep it at 10%.
We want at least 10%.
Right, that's what.
Right.
Well, the 10% was going to be the whole parcel also.
Correct.
Yeah, it's already written that way.
Yeah.
That's the way it's written now, and I think that's most favorable.
So if you think
So what,
that's going to give you more open space when 75% of it's,
Developed. And with
Residential.
seven units per,
but the way it's written now is if it's 90% commercial and 10% residential, you're still taking 10% of that parcel?
But the chances of that.
it's never going to be.
It's not going to work.
We don't even allow that. It's got to be at least 25% of which other.
25,
Yeah.
75 is the split.
Minimum.
It has to be at minimum.
Right, but I'm saying Barney proposed the percent of the percent. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If your goal is to have a 10% tied to the residential, percent of a percent.
Yeah, but then we're going back to the original point, which is
Yeah.
that we don't know how much residential we're going to have. So.
no more than 75%
Can't do the math.
would be the max. Or maybe if you change that number.
Exactly.
If you say it's 70%, then
You know,
it's still
Get the
10% of the percentage of the net developable acreage.
Right, but if you,
I guess the other thing I'd bring up is nobody is mixed use today. For somebody to want to be mixed use and have it rezoned, that means they're going to want to have a good bit of residential. Otherwise, they might as well just be commercial and stay commercial. So then they wouldn't have any open space requirement.
yeah, but also they're at a disadvantage. If somebody actually wanted to do more commercial than residential, they'd be put at a disadvantage because they'd end up having to do more open space than if it were separated out. So yeah, it's unusual, but what if somebody actually wanted to do more commercial? They would be disincentivized by having this all at one.
I guess they could.
MXDs aren't trying to incentivize commercial.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is trying to incentivize commercial because we know we don't want other just all residential developments. In fact, come up here, sir. No, well, Pat shouldn't be
he
doing
came
it
up
either,
too.
but
We have to have a record on the microphone, okay?
Carl Munder, Town Council. The problem is, you're thinking residential, but what if somebody comes in and does 75% commercial, And therefore, then you have an overwhelmingly partial that's commercial, concentrated commercial, but it should be some more open space within that commercial.
We don't have open space requirements for commercial.
But this 10% will leave it as net developable acreage. So also, is a net developable acreage for the parcel development or all that whole, say if you have a 20-acre parcel, is this 10% for that 20 acres? Or if somebody comes in and says, well, I just want to do a 10%, like a 10-acre parcel of development right now, and then do the rest later, so is that 10% just to that 10 acres?
Are they subdividing? Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Doing a subdivision?
Subdivision of an existing parcel. Say that, everyone keeps mentioning the Beck. Beck is, say, 75 acres on both sides of 27, somewhere around there. But are we going to require, when someone comes in, purchases and develops it, are we going to require them to submit the full plans for that property right there and then? Or are they going to be doing it piecemeal? Like,
Well,
Center Street.
you're actually getting ahead of us. I mean, it's a good question because we're going to make sure we have some safeguards in here for that.
Right.
But we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Okay.
And they might just do it in phases, not necessarily a subdivision, they would do it in
But
phases.
that's what I mean, phases,
Oh, you're
but then-
talking phases? Okay.
Yeah, phase is not, but then how's
Okay.
the 10% going to apply to the different phases? Is it going to be, but if somebody comes in, does one phase of, say, 50/50, then another phase 75 commercial, 25% residential, then say the third phase opposite, 75% commercial, 25% residential throughout the whole thing. And then if you're saying, well, if it's strict commercial, 75% doesn't have any open space in that 75% commercial, then you can get like an overly commercial area is the best way. Is like, shouldn't a commercial area might have like a little pocket park in it or something and break it up so you don't have like a strict commercial office park feeling to this land is the best way of describing it. And the 10% will allow that. It's just a question of, is it a phase 10% or the net or the whole acreage of the parcel? Because say it's 75 acres, if he buys it and subdivides it to somebody else, sells it to somebody else, then different phase too.
Even if you broke it up, the percent.
broke it up and sell it
But
to-
even if you broke it up, those percentages, if you take a percentage of those percentages, it would still be the same number.
Okay, that's
But I
what,
think I understand your question now. What I think that he's asking
yeah.
is if you have the commercial portion, is that
Concentrated.
going to also be required to have some of the open space through
Yeah.
that? I think that is.
Yeah, a little green park here and there within the commercial so that people can walk around into the little pocket park.
All right,
that's
so
something
fine,
within the commercial.
I'll go back to let's just keep it 10% across the board.
If I could.
Yes, go.
I think that accomplishes.
That's always been, Pat Rockenberg, Mayor, that was always been one of the challenges of the Planning Commission. You have to look at where this applies across the board and how many other properties will be impacted. While you're usually looking at this for one particular property, you have to think ahead, how is this going to apply? And I guess, is this going to apply to Green Tree as well?
Make that assumption.
You can't, okay. I was just trying to, you ought to think about where it's going to apply
MXD
elsewhere.
Wherever the MXD zone is,
That's where it applies.
where it's going to apply.
You're just going to set an MXD zone
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the town.
that's
Okay.
the whole point.
That's and another thing, I think we discounted too quickly, and normally we don't care how people get their financing, how they get their money, that's not your job. But if, I don't know enough about the financing, I haven't purchased in 30 years, but if it's a major source of financing, it may make it, it's where they can't do it. And it's something to consider if you do a project and people can't get normal financing. I don't know that Fannie Mae is.
Well, I think, I don't know that they'll change. You just,
Not a number one factor.
we'll just have to wait and see what they are, where they are. So we'll just leave it across the board 10%. The next section is 98-60 is townhouse developments. The only section here that we're looking at is purpose and scope. And it's the underlined portion.
Where are you?
On page 5?
We're,
3
we're,
and 13.
we're at 3. This doesn't have page numbers.
At the bottom, yours
At
doesn't
the very
have
bottom,
pages.
on the left.
Oh, sorry. So is everyone okay with the 98-60, Section A.
Yeah, and so this is pulling the CC, mixed CC into this, which, is fine if that ends up happening, because there's comments throughout, and I agree, I think it should all be consistent, but that would be, I guess, town council has to do that, but anyway.
And then the next section is the 9861, mixed-use development within the CC and the mixed-use district developments. So we have the purpose and scope, and then it goes into the pattern book after that.
Right. Yep.
Section already exists because of the MXUCC. So you would just be adding, or the town council would be just adding
Right, but
to this.
aren't we trying to eliminate that from the code? Isn't there, we're gonna keep the MXUCC?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's proposed so far.
As it stands now.
Section B is the pattern book.
So,
This is great.
I always love talking about the drive-throughs.
Yeah.
And I would wait, since they're actually further ahead and under the 112 or whatever, 112. But since on page 4 at the bottom, K does talk about drive-through service location and layout, that's part of the pattern book. I would just say, because if you look at starting on page 9, permitted uses, so you have like the banks with or without drive-through, you have the coffee shops with or without drive-through, the drugstores, and the laundry as potential. So the thing is that I would say is, again, depending on how large of a parcel, is that there could be an issue if you have each of these types of businesses in the commercial, all with drive-throughs, because that also kind of conflicts with number 2C on page 4, vehicular and pedestrian connectivity with development into the town to include walking and cycling. Not really conflicts, but there's other things, like the purpose of which is so that people can walk, and if there's drive-throughs everywhere and cars driving around and anyway, I just think it's an issue.
So Leslie, I actually had a point to that too. So if you go to page 10, it says coffee shops with or without drive-throughs on F, but then you go down to O, it says restaurants and lunchrooms without drive-through service.
Right.
Well, some coffee shops can be considered
Oh,
restaurants.
I know. We had that conversation when we were doing this a few years ago. It's like, how do you determine? And I mean, but it's potentially serious, because you look at Dunkin' Donuts and it's a total mess.
Terrible. It's awful.
And can you imagine like 4 different businesses within some small area who all have drive-throughs?
So for this exercise for MXD, is it unreasonable to say, I can see the purpose of a bank having a drive-through, but maybe we don't allow drive-throughs for restaurants and coffee shops?
I think that's what we had put in there to start out with.
I know that I was always bringing up like too many drive-throughs.
And I think we used the exception of banks, did we not? Or
I think we did say banks, because someone convinced us.
So ultimately, every site is going to come through Planning Commission for review and approval, and also through the planning and engineering staff for the town. So each site plan for each building will be brought to your attentions, and you would hope that we're looking at that as a staff level, and then also giving you recommendations to not create the Dunkin' Donuts situation. So
I think, so here it says the pattern book, okay, drive-through service, location, and layout. Like, that's part of what we get to look at. But it also says that these drive-throughs are permitted uses. So it seems to me we should have like just something that's sort of like, that we have a little bit more discretion than just that we get to, I don't know.
Otherwise, it's not going to look like we have like any consistency,
We-
inconsistent rules.
Right, we have
It's
to
gonna be like,
have
oh, that's just what
consistent
the
rules.
whim of the planning commission, and we have no legs to stand on.
Couldn't we say something in there, drive-through pending safety evaluation by the fire department or the police department or something like that?
Well, that,
I mean, you referenced the Dunkin' Donuts, and it is challenging. I mean, I go there a lot. 2 points. One is apparently the public likes it. But 2, that parking lot can't handle, if every person going through the drive-through actually parked, they wouldn't be able to park. So something's got to give there, like when you consider that. I mean, it's a very popular place. It can't handle the parking, even if the drive-through went away.
I mean, I would think maybe
People weren't used to
something like to make sure that these places are spaced out,
I think that's
Particularly on the corners of the
engineering.
buildings. I think we had mentioned.
Discuss that.
See, I think there's
Yes.
stuff that we talked about that.
I don't think
Yeah,
they
it's gone by
expected
the
it to be as popular as it is, and it's very popular.
It might relocate itself to the Beck property at some point.
Ron?
Ron Thompson, Vanmar. I believe that you addressed the issue of drive-throughs and pedestrian conflicts in paragraph E on page 8, where rather than trying to restrict or define particular uses, you define that drive-through lanes needed not to be located on the street where you have pedestrian movement, but on the rear of buildings or sides so that you were able to separate out those type of movements from it. So if you want to have a successful commercial elements of within commercial, you need to allow for the drive-through. What you've taken, and to John's point, staff will be looking at site plans to ensure that you've been able to maximize pedestrian connectivity through developments there. And that's why you had number of lanes and located only in the back or sides of buildings, not on the front sides. So in order to do that, if there's any congestion, it's away from the street, which is where you're trying to build that pedestrian atmosphere there.
Yeah, Section E is very well crafted in that regard.
So if we stay with that, though, it goes back to, again, coffee shops allow drive-throughs, but restaurants not. So I feel like either way, it should be consistent.
I don't think staff changed any of that. I think we added a couple notes where you see highlighted, but this was from a couple years back when the commission had.
We could equate coffee shops with whether it's fast food or what do they call that other thing now? The good fast food, the slow food, the medium, but obviously not sit-down restaurants. But I think that I would like to for the pattern book that the planning commission can say, okay, or staff first, can say, all right, now we've already got X amount of businesses and this within an X acreage, and there's no more drive-throughs. We're done. If you want to put your restaurant without a drive-through, you can do that. But and that just goes. It's also just the sitting and the fumes and and I don't know what residences are going to be. We have these buffers, but it's like you could have a house that's I don't know, behind it, and then you're all these fumes from cars sitting there. And so it's not just a matter of walkability. It's like car culture. So I would just like us to, I'm not saying we should make some specific thing. I'm just saying that we should be able to have more discretion.
Thanks.
And that's very clear and, you know, we can put in like it's X, I'm not good with the numbers because everybody hates my numbers, but you know, that the pattern book is like, we can decide.
I just asked Tom if you could allow drive-through as a special exception. That way you're just not shutting the door without knowing what it may work, but you certainly don't want to get into the scenarios you were pointing out. But if you could allow it as a special exception, that would give you a little bit more teeth, and I think you were looking for that teeth, so.
I think that would be great.
I like that one.
So Tom, what would you suggest? Oh, I'm sorry, Victor, go ahead.
Okay. So this is already a three-step process: concept plan, preliminary plan, pattern books. To add a special exception to it is beyond unnecessary. And to have a list of permitted uses is unnecessary. You already have permitted uses in the town. All of the permitted uses in retail and business should be allowed in the MXD. All of those things are already in your ordinance. The state of Maryland doesn't even recommend having a permitted. They only recommend having a list of non-permitted in MXD zones. If you already have a list of all the things that are allowed in retail zones and commercial zones, why would this have a more restrictive list if this is supposed to be?
Because there's residences, because you're mixing the
They're
commercial
all
and
residents.
residences.
The whole town is covered by residents and businesses. There's no one particular
But
area
they're,
other
they're
than the
commercial
industrial park.
zones. Yes, there's commercial zones.
And there's houses
residential
next
zones.
to all of those
Trying to craft
areas.
something that will work for the future, not, you know, what we've inherited now is what we've inherited. We're trying to have a vision for what we want for
Oh,
our
and I
citizens.
understand that, but the MXD you're writing here doesn't work that way. You're trying to create a Euclidean zone and a floating zone, like trying to determine the number of drive-throughs in a 1 acre parcel.
Why would that, why
He's
would
already
that
told
be,
you that
why
the
would that be
standards-
Euclidean to
All-
limit
because you're
drive-throughs?
trying to create standards that are specific to each and every single use. You don't have to. The whole thing is about discretion. No one can come in here and say to you, I'm entitled to 10 drive-throughs, especially with the development standards that are written. You can't, it's just like parking. If I came in here and I said I want a Dunkin' Donuts, and I have a parcel that doesn't handle the parking, I don't get to tell you I still get the Dunkin' Donuts because it's zoned that way. I have to follow the development standards. There are development standards not only in here, but in your ordinance that will limit all of those things.
All right, and that's what
Trying
I
to
was-
create
and that's
additional-
actually what I was saying, was we have, just to make sure that we have the discretion, you know. If
You have
want-
more discretion.
If you don't want to
guys
add,
are taking away your discretion
Yeah.
every time you add another micromanaging line in here. The whole point is so that you have the discretion from a design standpoint to say yes or no. If you look at a thing and it says 4 drive-throughs, and you can say, this is not an MXD that we want. But when you start to put in micromanaging standards in here, it changes the other way. If you already have it. The permitted uses, and I agree with you, restaurants, coffee shop, why is that in here? You already have all these uses that are allowed in the town. Why aren't those uses allowed in MXD? You don't want industrial, don't put industrial in here. That should be a prohibited use. But
Right.
it should say all of the commercial or retail or office uses, the things that you want in MXD that are allowed in the town of Mount Airy, or should be allowed in MXD. And the things we don't want are industrial uses. If you've already have prohibited uses, you don't have to put them in here. You've already said that. The second part of that is creating special exceptions for hotels, clubs, nursing homes, drive-through lane. Why? You already have an enormously long, at least 3-year process for somebody to develop a piece of property in this zone. Adding a special exception is unnecessary when you have 3 levels of discretion: design discretion, development design discretion, and concept discretion all along the way. So I would just say you're adding too many levels, unless you don't want anything, which is where this is going. Every single time you add an additional standard that you either already have or goes in conflict with the discretion that's in this document, you're creating an unusable zone. And right now, those kind of things exist in this document.
I do want to correct one thing. This is not drafted as a floating zone, just to be clear. This was drafted, I don't know when it was, 16, 15, as a Euclidean zone. Doesn't have to be. I'm just saying what's been drafted.
Tom, can you, to Victor's point, and I think our intent was, certainly we're not trying to disallow anything or they wouldn't be spending time working on the zone at all. We would just move on to the next subject. But that being said, we were just trying to make sure we had teeth, and I think John had alluded to that. I'd rather hear it from you than the developer. Does this planning commission have the authority to disallow a drive-through if it's permitted, if it's a permitted use in that zone as they go through the review process?
I would say yes, but every time that you, well, I don't like dispensing legal advice in public here, given who's listening, but I would say that every time you have a completely discretionary decision based on nothing more than the membership's discretion,
It can be a
without any
challenge.
standards at all, you become more susceptible to challenge.
Right.
And we know that a planning commission's decision on approving or disapproving a plan can be appealed to the circuit court. That's all, I can really lend to that.
Yeah, we need it.
Well, what about, taking out permitted uses?
No.
Right, but if they're permitted, it looks like they're permitted. That was my concern about why I was saying that I wanted to put more stuff in the pattern book, because it's like, this is permitted, which means they think it's permissible, right? And so if it's listed as permitted and then we're saying, no, you can't have it, then we either have to have it not listed as permitted, or we have to be very clear in the other part that we have all the discretion related to these permitted. I mean, I get the point, about having all the permitted uses, but
Okay, so we have 13 more pages to go through, and a lot more on our agenda. I don't want us to be here all night. I think that we should have a workshop just on this.
yeah,
In
we have,
my-
60 days to get this
Yeah,
back to,
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Roxanne, I did give you that date.
Yes.
The council is available.
There's possible dates here that we can, and I'm going to give them to you. Thursday, the 30th of January, Thursday, the 6th of February, Monday, the 10th of February, Thursday, the 2nd, Thursday, the 13th of February, and Monday after 6 p.m. On the 17th of February. This is an important ordinance and things, so I want to get everyone here. So we really need to concentrate on this. So do I need to give you the dates again?
Please.
Okay. Thursday, the 1:30. I'll give you one, January 30th. Thursday, February the 6th. Monday, February the 10th. Thursday, February the 13th. And then Monday after 6, this February the 17th.
It's President's Day.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, it's not a good one for me. The other ones are good.
I can't do the 10th and I can't do the 13th. I do the 30th.
February the 6th.
February the 6th. Is that a good date?
Yeah.
Works. Like it.
What time did you want to start that meeting?
We'd like to start it at 6.
6 is good for me. I don't know about everybody else.
Works.
I'll get here as fast as I can.
6:30.
6:30? Would that be better for you, Leslie? Lindy?
No, I'll make sure to, if, depending on what traffic's like, I'll try for 6.
Okay.
If I'm late, it's only because whatever happened on 70.
We'll go out there and make sure nothing happens.
I will come straight from the office, so.
Okay, thank you.
6 p.m. 2/6.
I forgot to ask, are you okay with that date?
Not currently, but I think I can move my conflicts, so.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is a momentous occasion. We got everybody, it's, okay. So we will table this discussion, pick it back up on Thursday, February the 6th, the workshop beginning at 6 o'clock.
Roxanne, can I
Yeah.
just say a message to Victor and any potential developers of that particular site, that the town is very much interested in getting this zone straightened out. You've been working very hard on it. While it may seem like we're putting too many roadblocks in place, this town has just been through a lot. We were #1 in growth in the state from 90 to 97. We've suffered some ill effects with our schools being overcrowded, so we're a very cautious planning commission. That being said, putting Center Street through, as Councilwoman Pamela Reed has been stressing for, is a huge part of our town, what we want to do, what we want our town to become, and this is very important to us. So we're not discounting or trying to put unnecessary roadblocks in place. We're just trying to protect our community. And so we do appreciate your input, and I hope that the Cash brothers continue to come and offer their input, and then certainly respect our concerns as we voice back. But we are interested, we want to make this happen, and we want to work together.
Well,
Ron Thompson, I just wanted, for clarification at this workshop, the last one, you didn't allow the public to speak. This will be a true workshop where the public interacts with the Planning Commission as we work through the MXD ordinance. Otherwise, the person that's most affected by it doesn't need to attend, I guess, there, if a developer on this.
Tom, aren't these workshops meant so that the planning commission can discuss the ordinance with just observation?
The answer is you can do it however you want to do it. Yes, there are some workshops where it's just whatever public body is discussing it, you know,
I think,
discusses it, but, you know, I guess, you know, the question is, would you want to hear comments about the other pages that you didn't reach, you know, from the public? That'd be, and how would you want that conveyed to you? I guess it's ultimately up to you all.
I think that if we do it, it would be at the end, not.
That's what I was going to say. We would probably, yes, thank you, Leslie. We'd do the workshop, we would invite comments at the end, but not during the discussion while we're going through it. But comments at the end of what we've done.
In limited time.
Yep.
Would you all encourage input?
yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you can always input to the workshop via email or, you know, come in if you need to talk to John. You can always talk to him so he can give input as well.
Do you have a stakeholder?
Yeah.
I'm going to a little bit on this. The point being, we had one meeting with the staff and the stakeholder, and none of their suggestions were incorporated, so they were not even brought forward to the Planning Commission. So the issue being, just keep that in mind when you say, well, talk to the staff or put it out there. What you have is what the staff wanted for this ordinance, and it does not reflect input from a major stakeholder.
Well, why didn't
In
you
what- in
send
what
it?
you're
Why didn't you
in what you're
send it?
trying to do for pushing Center Street through, you need to have the input of that stakeholder.
Okay, then they can
Send the input to
send it to
Roxanne.
us. Send it to me.
I apologize. It should have been part of that. There was Victor's comments on a separate page. I thought it was actually part of this.
Okay, so
printing,
John's
so
gonna
I'll
give it to
forward-
us.
I'll forward all
Please.
comments from, and I think that was part of the email that I sent you initially. It was in there. It's in the back of that email I sent you initially. Pretty sure. It had-
But if you-
it had Victor's and also Carl's comments as a separate item in the
But remember,
back of that
they're
email I
just
sent
their
you.
comments. They're not the things that are dictated to us.
It's
No, they're
suggestions-
comments.
suggestions.
Absolutely, they're
Yeah.
comments.
And they were emailed to you initially, right after the town council meeting in January.
I'm not opposed to interaction, but we do have to get it done.
Right.
And that's the only rub there. I mean, it would be nice to have your input. but we have to make sure that we achieve the goal of completion.
So I would say that if there were comments, I don't know that I saw the comments if they were forwarded to us. It would be nice that we could have them prior to the workshop so that we could read through them, so that when we sit down and have that discussion, we understand the needs.
Okay.
And again, it was emailed out to you initially right after the town council meeting, but I'll confirm that it was emailed to you. I'll send it out again and also make copies for you and the public during that work session.
Okay,
There will also be a public hearing before the town council because these are
right.
in Chapter 112 changes. So there'll also be opportunity at the town council, who will, after all, be the legislative body, which passes whatever it passes. So.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I'll ask Ron, do you want to make the presentation for the concept plan? She has not arrived yet.
I can wait till the end.
Okay.
The next ordinance is actually one proposed by memo.
Okay. So we'll continue. Ordinance 2020-2 is a proposed zoning text amendment to allow a restaurant/deli in the industrial district, which is 112-45, pursuant to the town code, section 112-66B. Discussion and recommendation to the Board of Appeals. John, do you want to go over this?
Excuse me. So the applicant has requested the Planning Commission to allow this text amendment to the zoning code, section 112-45B. There's an existing site plan, there's a proposed site plan currently that's under review that the owner of that building wants to put in a small restaurant, luncheon room is what they would call it. And this is his proposal to get this in front of the Planning Commission to get that ordinance added to our code to allow such use. It is restricted by 15% of the total lot. It can't exceed that much. So you can't. So basically, if you had an acre lot, you can only do 15% of that acre.
And 3,000 square feet.
And no more than 3,000 square feet. Right. So I think there are situations that are currently in Westminster where they have establishments that provide lunch for an industrial park. And again, it's just the position that the applicant wants to do is in front of you for your review and approval or denial. And I'm suggesting approval.
Well, I have a question. Why is this coming as a text amendment, not a special exception?
There isn't
Tom.
a special exception that would allow restaurants within the I district.
Right.
So the proposal is to make it a permitted use. The only means of getting a restaurant in the I district is through a text amendment. Because there's not a special exception created for a restaurant in the I district.
Right.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
For the applicant.
I am, because I actually wrote the text amendment to the town planning town attorney. Lot 16A is being developed by Priority Install. And as we look now throughout the industrial park, which is almost now completely, or will be almost completely developed, the only way for you to go get a sandwich or something in the morning, a cup of coffee, is, oh, let's get in the car, warm it up, and roll down the road someplace to go get it, then stop the car, start it back up, put a few more fumes in the air and roll back. Something that is not environmentally sustainable, as opposed to being able to walk across the street and grab a salad or get your cup of coffee here. And that's why when we wrote it, it was limiting in size and also limiting in terms of percentage of a total development, so that you didn't have an industrial lot that had a a large restaurant on it. It was thought of, and in this particular case, they're looking at somebody that works with them now and where they are in Frederick, wants to come over here to Mount Airy, open it up, be serving, in this particular one, they'll serve breakfast, lunch, and close probably around 3 o'clock in the afternoon there. So as you look at the build out of the town, you want to be able to have those opportunities where people can walk to get their lunch.
In an industrial park, they have a captive audience there.
Right.
Right.
And it's not like people are going to be driving there from someplace else, and it is limited in
Might
time.
get somebody that drops their child off at Goddard and says, on my way to get on the road, I'm going to get a cup of coffee to go there or something, but it's not a huge draw within the town.
A destination.
No. Will not be a destination.
Right. I don't have an issue with it. We need a motion to send it to the Board of Appeals. No, we don't. Just to the town council?
This body would recommend.
I'm sorry. So we need to recommend it to the town council so they
I'll
can.
make a motion.
Go ahead.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion that we recommend conditional approval of the concept site plan for Lot 17 of the Twin Arch Business Park, Section 4, subject to all town and county agency comments being addressed and final recordation of amended plat.
No,
Nope.
excuse me.
Sorry.
We're on the text amendment.
Oh, sorry.
I'm to come up for the site plan.
Where is it? That's what I do, like what everybody else does. Where is it?
It's
Ordinance 2020.
Oh, I'm like reading the wrong thing. I thought it was on the same King's, is this
It's-
King's Sport?
No. This will be adjacent to King Sports.
Because I don't have it. Okay. Here.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Okay. Wait, I have to redeem myself. Let me make the motion. All right.
There it is at the bottom.
Okay, strike that last one. All right, I motion that the planning commission should recommend to the town council approval of the text amendment as proposed, which would allow restaurants or lunchrooms that do not exceed 15% of the lot or parcel and provide no individual use exceeds and does not exceed 3,000 square feet. It's kind of written.
I second.
In the industrial zone, yeah.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend forwarding a positive recommendation for the approval of the text amendment. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it goes. It will be presented to the town. Now, Tom and John, will this go to the council at their next meeting?
It won't make it on the February's agenda, it will make it on the March.
And that is to probably reintroduce and set a public hearing.
I'm sorry?
That is to reintroduce and set a public hearing. This is a Chapter 112 change. So there's going to have to be, with proper advertising, we have to do it twice, first time 14 days in advance. So that's why it's not on February 5th or 3rd. So, but anyway,
Okay.
it'll be on the agenda for March to set a public hearing, reintroduce and to set a public hearing.
The next introduction is Resolution 2020-1, setting the water and sewer allocations pursuant to Section 109-19.4B.
That should read approval of the priority area for purpose of water sewer allocation. There's probably an amended agenda.
Yeah, which I thought we emailed to you guys as well. It's highlighted. Out there, well, exactly. Came with the map. You have it, Roxanne?
No. Didn't get it.
I got it. Are you getting it? I think other people need it, so yeah, I better get a copy.
Got the one from 2018.
Do you need a copy?
I have one.
That's not that bad. I've already got that. That was in the packet.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't in mine for some reason.
No.
What about the numbers?
Do we have the numbers anywhere?
What do you mean the numbers, the what numbers? Yeah, so the process will be that the Planning Commission first approves at its January meeting, regular meeting, the priority areas, which is an allocation category. What happens at the town council is that they will, upon recommendation of the town engineer, which has already happened, set the available capacity, what we call the water and sewer available capacity yield. But all that's on the agenda tonight is for the Planning Commission to set the priority areas. The resolution and then the map that you have attached to it is the same set of priority areas, same boundary as has been approved the last 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Going back to 2014, I don't think that's changed, and basically encompasses the downtown area, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, nothing's changed from what was.
Okay.
Yeah. In 2018, it was 75, 76% of the total was the priority area.
In Center Street, yeah, I meant to say.
Yeah. Well, it's the map area.
Oh, yeah. Okay, do I hear, does anyone have any questions first?
So it's essentially the downtown zone.
And Center Street.
And,
Center Street.
and Center Street.
Well, yeah.
Side of the Beck property to 27.
From cold storage all the way down to 27. That's what the map is.
Seeing no questions, do I hear a motion?
I would so move to accept priority area designation.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the priority area for the purpose of the water and sewer allocation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. That one goes to the council as well.
I'm sorry?
I second, and Bill made the motion.
Okay.
Okay, we have the next thing on the agenda is the compact site plan for King Sports Construction.
And this is a site plan that was brought, was under review with the, planning and zoning and engineering for the town staff, S190032, King Sports Construction, Twin Arts Business Park, Section 4, Lot 17. The proposed use is going to be a warehouse office with outside storage. It's a concept site plan for a 9,100 square foot building with a 2-floor office area of 1,300 feet per floor. It is in, the Twin Arch Business Park Center. It's in industrial flex use. It is in a priority, or it's an existing and final, existing water and sewer service area. Is, was approved back in 2011 Lot 17, Gordon Plat Book 54, page 205. It contains 1.594 acres. The engineer for the owner is here. He can answer any of your questions to the site plan.
Okay.
Thank you. Ron Thompson, Vanmar Associates here for King Sports Construction. They are proposing to develop, move their operation to Lot 17 along Twin Arch Road, Section 4. There will be just one entrance into the site. I believe that King Sports Construction may be the first environmental sustainable company located in town of Mount Airy. I say that because their business is both in the installation and also the rehabilitation of turf fields, synthetic turf fields. They have a process, much of their machinery is patented, where they actually, when they take up the old turf, they only last about 10 to 15 years and they have to be replaced, surprisingly, is that the plastic beads are placed into a sack, reused, the turf is cut, re-rolled, and stored, which is why you have a gravel storage area, which is to store these huge sacks of beads as well as the rolled up turf until such time as they are removed to a recycling company that then recycles the turf for ground up for playgrounds, riding rinks, horse trails, and so forth. The actual waste that they advertise this, quite frankly, the actual waste that they produce from recycled field is 40 pounds, largely a large cat litter bag there. So they're excited to move to this location. And that's why, in particular, you see the large gravel area back there. During the season, they're rolling up the turf mats and storing them until such time in the off-season, they load them onto trailers and they're hauled off to a recycling company. There is no on-site recycling that goes. It is just part of their operation. It goes off-site to a company that is set up to do that.
Does anyone have any questions?
You said they're relocating?
They are. They're located just outside of Mount Airy.
Is this a larger parcel for them?
I believe it is. I think it's, their operation may be part of where they live, and now their business is such they need a place for it.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes.
Gary Fry, 4021 Twin Arch Road. I saw in the plans that there's no traffic impact. What is, I see that there's some criteria that's there, but what was the original traffic impact that lot was supposed to have when it was divided in 2021, or 2011, excuse me? Because it would fall into that site plan, right, or that development?
Ron, can you answer?
I'm trying to remember what they had projected in terms of way back then for when the industrial subdivision was developed, what that traffic impact would have been.
Because we seem to keep adding. We don't have more traffic because we fell under this site development plan, 11 or so many years ago, but we're kind of just ignoring this. So that's my question. I think it needs to be looked at.
More than likely, I can't speak to without trying to go back to the records. It probably would have been based on a flux industrial zone, so much acreage, where much of that now has turned out to be warehouse a lower traffic than what would have been anticipated in the initial subdivision process.
Okay. Patty?
Yes, Patty Washba, Town Council. I would like to reiterate what the gentleman said just before me, because we are experiencing a really big problem over at Back Acre Circle with the dance studio, and trying to combine residential with commercial or industrial is a challenge. And we're going to be having a meeting on Wednesday night, and I can assure you this town hall is going to be packed with people. I've received so many letters regarding this issue. So it concerns me that the deli that was just approved, I didn't see anything there about a traffic study. I didn't see anything there about parking. I just keep hearing about people walking to a deli. I would ask you to go there and drive around that area. Because even though it's just industrial and there's not, on the one side, and there's not a lot of places for them to be able to go to get something to eat, not many of those people are going to be walking to wherever this is, because a lot of these places are far away. So as a liaison for the streets and roads, I would ask that when things come before you, that we do a better idea, a better review of how the traffic studies have been performed, because something that was done in 2011 is not going to fly right now in 2020. And we really need to find out, for example, for this Kingsport construction, red flag went up when I heard there's one way in and there's one way out, because that's why we're having such a hard time right now. The parking lot where the dance studio is located has one way in and one way out. So anything we can do to help you in that regard, if you want us to come to any of the meetings where you're going to be reviewing this, I'm trying to do a better job myself of attending these commission meetings so that I can, so like I said, when the red flags go up because of what we're experiencing right now, but it's really important to look at the traffic studies, and it's really important to look at parking. Thank you.
So the only thing, real second, the only thing I would say is looking at this lot, it's on the opposite side of the industrial park, so it's not near the residential community.
If I may, this site produces, when I talk about, there's one entrance into the site which has a warehouse building on it. And it comes out onto Back Acre Circle, which is the piece of Back Acre Circle all the way on the other side of the development. There is industrial development on each side of the road. Their route out to Twin Arch Road would be not going around the long way around Back Acre Circle, but it would be going down to Aaron Lane, thank you.
Yeah.
Senior moment there, Aaron Lane, and out to Twin Arch, which is all industrial road.
And this lot's located right near the Canyon Contracting that's currently there. And I'm not sure, it doesn't generate that many trips, I think.
Six peak hour trips.
Right, six peak hour trips.
How many?
Six?
Six.
I don't have a copy of the plat that you have, but what is a concern going forward, it may work for this particular construction company, but what I'm finding that's happening back there is originally things are brought in front of the planning commission, and then those tenants leave. And it becomes an issue because not all the time do they come back before the plan commission when that next tenant comes and takes over that spot. So what's going to work for this company might not work for the next person that goes in there. So I just want to bring that to light because, like I said, we're experiencing for the past year, it's been a huge, huge issue. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of where this is and how impactful it will be for the residents.
I think that's valid. I don't think this business is going to be a problem, like from what I've understand, but that is a good point. I mean, we do need to consider the summation of the traffic impacts.
Right.
And if they sell or the tenant changes,
Right.
you need to be aware of that and reevaluate.
I don't know, I mean, I'm not certain if they don't always come before the
No,
planning
they
commission, but I know I've asked that question before, and I was told that no, not all the time do they
Right.
come before the planning commission, so
How do we control that?
that's why we have the issue that we're
Right,
dealing with.
they did not, right.
I can
Peak
answer.
hours for the dance studio, is that mostly after business hours?
After dinner.
There are some that happen from what I'm being told from, now I haven't verified this, but what I'm hearing from the online submittal forms is that it seems that the younger kids do have some during the time that businesses are there, so parking's a real issue. And we've taken the parking away on the street.
Right, and then the dance studio, what if they leave and they go to a different place, and then we've made this decision thinking about a dance studio that may or may not be there, while businesses have to be there for longer than they might be there, so we can't.
Right. So that's why you really have to look at what is going to be happening and how it does impact the roads, how it impacts the residents.
I mean,
So-
the big contributors to that area are Health Unlimited, the dance studio, and the gymnasium. I mean, they have to make up 95% of the traffic back there.
Right. But you were saying, I'm sorry, you were saying that, so it looks like, I'm looking at the map online now, and Backacre Circle and then Aaron Road, so you're saying that the trucks would
You have
most
to
likely
talk
go.
better into your microphone.
You're saying that the trucks would most likely go Aaron Road to Twin Arch and not go toward the residential?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, for anybody on this section of Backacre Circle, Twin Arch Business Park, they're going to come up Aaron Lane, take a right turn, and go into the businesses along there. It's much longer to go around the other way.
Yeah, okay.
Did you have a question?
My question is more to the compilation of traffic over time, because we often have these discrete places come in and it's like X amount of cars, which are very few, where it's like, oh, we didn't even need a traffic study because, but at what point, like, does the town start looking at the accumulation of the cars from the combined businesses?
So when you have a, one site that has a lot of traffic impact during the rush hour, right, the peak hour, that's when we would require a traffic study. When you only have 6 traffic trips in a peak hour, they're really not providing any impact. It's a very, very low impact. So you're not going to see vehicles coming in and out of there a lot during those times. But there is a certain number of trips that if they, and you see it on the plans, AM and PM both are 6 trips. If there's a certain number of trips that would trigger that, then we would ask for a traffic study. And we've done that in a couple places like the Goddard School. And they had, as an example, we required Goddard School to do a study of trips that are going up Twin Arch Road to the light, where we have a failing intersection.
And I believe the last traffic study done out there was for Brittany Manor, which included a build-out of the industrial park as background traffic.
Now, I believe the young man who came up, haven't you been here before and you've testified or you've spoken about traffic on Twin Arch Road? Not just, were you concerned about?
Amy, I've spoken about a couple parts of this. My concern is the traffic on Aaron Lane.
Okay.
When Business Park was done, they put a sidewalk and a curb on the coming into town side. But the traffic coming down the hill, and all you got these industrial vehicles trying to make a left-hand movement. People coming, they're not doing the speed limit coming down the road, coming down the hill. Right. So, and then you got people coming up from the bridge that is just, it's going to get trickier as time goes on. That's my concern, is the traffic as it relates to me and, coming up through there. So it's just the additional amount of trucks.
And
What kind
Patty,
of-
to speak to you, when an establishment comes in, gets approval from planning commission, if that building were to be unoccupied and then reoccupied, then, ultimately, they should be coming to the town to ask the zoning administrator for use and occupancy permit, which then, hopefully, that person, me, would say, wait a second, that use doesn't work there. The dance studio, I think, occurred prior to me coming here, so I'm hoping, being that I'm sort of on the reins on that, I'd be able to take my experience and my knowledge and say, no, wait a second, I'm not going to give you this. You need to come back to planning commission to get an approval, or to Board of Appeals to say, we'll allow this use within that area. So hopefully, it'll fall on my shoulders. Great.
I'll take it easy on Ron. This is not a traffic-related question. Carl Munder, Town Council. I am concerned that I want to make sure that the site plan encompasses that stormwater management, any leachate from the product being stored there is kept on site, mainly due to the fact that what's being stored there, mainly the used turf fields and the crumb rubber, which is the product that's underneath of it. There's an issue right now with the crumb rubber potentially leaching out lead and other toxic metals and other chemicals into the groundwater and surface water of the area. So I'm glad that the business is willing to locate here, and if it's only going to be recycled and taken off-site once a year, stored outside in unknown quantities of bags and rolled up turf fields, things will get washed and leaches out. The older the rubber is, the more prone it is to, it's more susceptible to leaching the dangerous chemicals off-site and into the surface water during rain. And according to the staff report, it indicates that there's existing stormwater management pond that can handle it, but it's existing site. And when that was developed as 2011, things change and we have to start taking into consideration use of the land that's coming in. That's it, Ron. That's it.
I can address for this specific site. And first of all, in terms of stormwater management, the use that's being proposed is not considered a hotspot by MDE. Therefore, no special requirements are imposed like they were for J&J Trash, which is when they park all their heavy trucks there and have a vehicle maintenance facility. It's considered a hotspot, and stormwater management is treated much differently, which is what we had to do for it there. In terms of worried about product leaching out, I mean, when you look at what they do when they go into these heavy white plastic bags, the beads are shaken off of it on the field itself. They're not left there in the turf mats itself and fall out on the way there. They're actually separated at the field when they're taken up, and the turf mats are shrink wrapped to hold them together. So until such time as they're removed.
And they're then put on gravel, correct? It's a gravel.
Put on
And
gravel.
it's a cover, it's undercover. Is it undercover or not?
No.
Well, they're relocating, so they already are doing this in a current site. So have there been any issues?
None.
Just wanted to bring it up. That's
It's legitimate.
Sounds like they're economically friendly.
economically or
Environment.
I
It's
mean,
on my brain.
no, I mean, Carl brings up a good point. These fields have been subject to scrutiny.
Yeah.
It's
a gray area.
legitimate. I mean, there has been debate as to what is contained in the rubber and athletes playing on these fields. But I think they're taking precautions, and it sounds like they're doing a good job.
But on some, like, when you say shaken and put in the bag, is that the crumb rubber or the stuff? Are you not that familiar with the process?
It's when they strip up the old turf.
Okay.
It goes up into a machine, and the loose rubber, which is in the mat itself, is shaken out of it into a screed. that goes up a conveyor into a bag at the field in which they are doing it, not
Yeah.
on site
Not on
there.
site, yeah.
So
No,
that
I
when
get
it's
that.
rolled up, it is just a grass mat at that point that's rolled up and shrink rolled.
Right, I mean. for-
Because the beads get reused again.
Right, for recycling, you don't want that stuff together, so, I mean, that's the place where you want to separate it.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying the process and operation, Ron.
The turf expert. You're a turf expert.
So I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we extend conditional approval of the concept site plan for Lot 17 of Twin Arch Business Park, Section 4, subject to all town and county agency comments being addressed, and the final recordation of the amended plat, and the rest of the detail of staff's recommendation at the bottom of page 5.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend conditional approval of the concept plan for Lot 17 to Twin Arch Business Park, Section 4, subject to all the town and county agency comments being addressed in the final recordation of the amended plat. All those in
Point of order.
Exactly.
There is no amended plat. I
There's
think
no
that
amended
got left over from Lot 18A.
That's right.
So strike that.
Strike that, please.
All of the,
I apologize.
it's being addressed, period. Everything else should be.
Yes, comments being addressed, period. Is that okay? If we-
Yes. I was like getting ready to speak up.
Signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. I do, Patty, oh, where did she go? I do understand that, that they're going in and out of there, and we don't know that they're there, so we need to find, I'm sorry.
Well, I think John addressed it.
Thought it wasn't seconded.
Deborah's trying to figure out who seconded.
It was seconded by Scott.
Motion. Did you approve? Bill.
Bill made the motion.
Nay, okay, that's, trying to figure out who was yay and nay.
Okay.
But go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
I think John addressed the fact that when they would be coming to the zoning administrator, he now would have a better idea of what should be coming in front of the planning commission, so that he would direct them and let them know that they would have to come here.
Right, and the fact that they would need a use and or occupancy permit when they move, because, we don't know when these things get leased up, we don't know who's coming and going.
Right, and anytime, just as a FYI, anytime that there's a parking lot with only one entrance and exit, that's something that needs to have better clarification of who's going to be using that and how many trips, because if you don't have that full circle where they can get in and out more easily, it makes it very hard to do the turnaround and come back, and a lot of those parking spaces are tight. So that becomes an issue, just an FYI.
So Patty, you were saying, can we be getting more information from you when, can we coordinate with the Streets and Roads Commission when we are going to be dealing with it? Especially, I know the Backacre Circle is this huge thing.
Right, I've been doing a better job of seeing what's coming in front of you to review, and so then therefore, if I have any comments that would help in your decision, I'll be glad to, share them, because now I've been on the commission for a little over a year, so I have a better idea than when I first started.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
I do want to clarify that, yes, they're supposed to come to me for a use and occupancy permit. It doesn't always occur, so you'd hope that you possibly would know when new businesses are coming in, and then I'd have to address the issue there if they don't come for a UNO. But they don't always ask us for that.
Well, then, I'm thinking for a high-impact area, or an area that we have some concerns for, we need to monitor it on an annual basis and see if
Right.
there has been any change.
I'll have to try to figure out how to keep a better eye or handle on that, if it's maybe at the town level, at town administrator, Holly, our town. Yeah, so she might have the knowledge of that activity occurring.
Hey, Patty, is Streets and Roads rescheduled for this Wednesday?
Okay, item number 7 on our agenda is the 2020 census. We're asking everyone to please keep a lookout in the mail for the 2020 census. The registration form should be up in the middle of May. The census begins on April the 1st, and this is important for different things in the town, different allocations, different grants, different amounts of money that we get within the town. So it's important that as many people as possible fill out the census form. The next thing are the future items. We've done number 1.
Yep.
Any other thing that's coming up that you know of, John, that you haven't put on here?
Yeah, I mean, currently there's other plans that are on review. I don't want to go through the whole list of what's coming up, but for next month's meeting, I'm not sure if we're going to have an actual plan to review. Hopefully so.
Okay. I don't need to mention the 2020 census again. I already did. I know. Got to emphasize that. It's mentioned twice.
Has everybody received their
survey?
Town survey?
And the due date is?
February 20th.
Okay. It's the last day of this month.
Leap year.
I'm sorry,
Here.
back in, so.
Any other items for the agenda?
You also have the 2 zoning administrator reports here for what happened in November,
Yes.
December as well.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions on those? Okay.
So real quick,
Yes.
tomorrow here at Town Hall, 6:30, 7:30 is the Year of the Woman 2020 dedication ceremony. Mayor Pat Rockenberg is going to read a proclamation declaring 2020 Year of the Woman. So if everyone can make it, that would be fantastic.
What time does that start, Pam? 6:30.
Anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded. We adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. See you next February the 24th.